Good afternoon, everyone, and thank you so very much for joining us at the last of the year AAN Australian Amyloidosis Network Patient and Carers Virtual Education event. And this time it's dedicated to World Amyloidosis Day, which was on October 26, a few days ago. So it's wonderful for me to see so many familiar faces, patient carers and families and friends. And it's fantastic to see this community grow ever stronger throughout this year. So as many of you may know, my name is Olga Maturna. I'm a hematologist at Box Hill Hospital in Melbourne, and I specialize in care of patients with myeloma and amyloidosis. And my passion is patient-centered care, as well as improving outcomes for patients with myeloma and amyloidosis through participation in clinical trials. So I'm just going to spend a minute, I guess, looking back at what the year has brought for patients with amyloidosis in Australia. And we have really seen some very encouraging developments. In ATTR amyloidosis, access to tafamidis has now been more established across Australia, which means that more people are receiving disease-modifying treatment rather than symptom control. And there are also very exciting clinical trials underway, both here and overseas as well, testing new gene silencing drugs, stabilizers, and even the cutting-edge technology called CRISPR, which is a gene editing technology used in amyloidosis for the first time. In AL amyloidosis, early diagnosis is remaining the key, but we've seen some improvements in access to newer myeloma-based treatments in amyloidosis, in particular to bispecific antibodies. And they have shown some really promising results in patients with relapsed AL amyloidosis. Each of the 4 AAN centers have a number of excellent clinical trials. And I encourage you all to refer to the AAN website for the list of trials that are currently open in your area. Also to note that the website has a wealth of information about amyloidosis, as well as recordings from the past education events that we have held. So once again, before I introduce the first speaker, thank you for being here. Can I please ask you to mute your microphones? There will be an opportunity to ask questions after each of the presentation, and it may be best to do this through the chat function. So let me introduce our first speaker, who is Pat Neely. I think Pat needs no introduction in this forum. She's a medical social worker and a founding member of the Australian Amyloidosis Network. She has recently retired from the board of the AAN, and she was appointed the inaugural AAN Emeritus member, and moreover, a member of the Order of Australia for her dedication in the work for patients with amyloidosis in Australia. Pat has tirelessly devoted her life to bettering the lives of people with amyloidosis for over 2 decades. And she worked in official and leading capacity in many areas of the health sector, and always focused on improvement of the holistic care for people with amyloidosis. She also has been a trusted and dedicated counselor, friend, and support for innumerable patients, families, and carers across Australia. So please welcome Pat Neely.
Thank you very much, everybody. I'm just going to perhaps reflect on this World Amyloidosis Day, which was a few days ago, and it's a good job it was, because I didn't have any power up here in Brisbane. We had an incredible storm, and we were out of power for over 48 hours with a lot of trees down. But I'm delighted to be asked to speak today by Olga and Kath. And I just want to reflect, really, because that's what World Amyloidosis Days are about, on how we got to this point, to think of those people along the way, and they have been many that have helped us build the AAN, but also other services, and there are now lots of services available. And to think of all those patients that I have had the pleasure of working with and have taught me so much. So some of you I recognise, some of you I don't, but welcome to everybody. I'm a medical social worker, as Olga mentioned, and was director of a large hospital department with cancer as my specialty when my journey with amyloidosis began. And some of you may know that, but I'll reflect on it a little anyway. As it was the sudden death of my husband, who was a surgeon, just 5 weeks after diagnosis of AL amyloid, that really obviously altered my life and my family's life, but also shocked a lot of his colleagues. They all thought he looked much fitter than they did, and that was the worry also. But it was a disease that many of them said to me they had never heard of. In fact, I had a big argument with the pathologist about whether it was AL amyloid or AL amyloid, and it was AL amyloid, obviously affecting his heart. But that then started a lot of people to think about amyloidosis, not just me, and I knew nothing about it, and not many of his colleagues knew either. And a group of us started to work together, doctors, mostly doctors, and then patients came into this, looking at how we could improve the awareness of amyloidosis and also improve medical standards, what this was all about, really, because in those days, there were no amyloidosis centres in Australia. And so it was very hard to know where you went. But we quickly learnt, obviously, how supportive the Americans were to us and the British. And I work very closely with the National Amyloidosis Centre staff in London that were funded by the health service to have an amyloidosis service just after my husband died. They were so generous with their time. I went across there, met their patients. It was fantastic. But that was the same with the staff in Boston and the Mayo, and many of those people remain friends of mine to this very day. We were all learning, and we all are still learning. Believe me, you're here today, as if you don't know already, a very complicated group of diseases that we're only just starting to unravel and understand. But all of us who've worked together have the same goals, basically, of raising awareness, improving diagnosis and medical care for all types of amyloid, although when I started there a long, long time ago, we hardly mentioned ATTR. It was all about AL. And the fact that people were dying within 6 months of AL, and what could we do to improve that? Really, things have changed tremendously. But also, there was no support in this country for patients and families, and we needed that. Very much in the cancer care, I'd been part of their support services, so I was fortunate in having lots and lots of contacts, and lots of contacts that really were important they were a network coming together and supporting us all, and that's very important. I have to also mention the Leukemia Foundation, because They knew of me, and they've just had their 50th anniversary birthday. I was there at their big party the other day in Brisbane, and I knew the hematologist there, Trevor Olsen, that started the Leukemia Foundation. And one of my department, I was head of the Mater Hospital in Brisbane, social work department. She was part of that as well. And because of that, and they were giving accommodation to patients, amyloid patients who were then having stem cell transplants from the country. They were very supportive of what I was trying to do, and from the very beginning offered me a desk. I was working, but obviously a desk so I could use their phones. They paid all my expenses, but they said from the very beginning, we can't pay you. And that was okay, because I was a volunteer and working with lots of patients, but also lots of staff in the Leukemia Foundation who knew nothing about amyloidosis. We started support meetings across Australia in all the capital cities. These were also education meetings, and meaning the staff learnt a lot about amyloid. If there were difficult patients, they referred them to me. So we worked incredibly well together. But after about 5 years, Peter Millay invited me to work on his unit, and he started an amyloidosis clinic in about 2004 when he came back from training in Toronto. And I have to thank Peter for all the support he's offered me, but everything that he's given to the AAN. He's now chairman of the board, and he deserves many, many thanks from us all, I can tell you. But I worked in his clinic for over 6 years, again, as a volunteer, because the clinics weren't all the time. And they told me they couldn't pay me, but that was all right. I learned an enormous amount because I saw every patient that was diagnosed at diagnosis and then followed them through, went to all the doctors' meetings, learned an enormous amount. But what I learned most of all was from the patients about what it was like to live with amyloidosis. Yes, I knew my story, but my husband didn't live long enough. And some incredible things happened in 5 weeks that I had to make very quick decisions about, such as going to intensive care. And I said no, he was dying. I mean, lots of issues. But I didn't understand what the symptoms were doing to our patients. And what I also learned there was how resilient patients are, how much they need at diagnosis, how they don't understand. And Peter Millay ran the first treatment trial for AL amyloidosis in Australia, and that was to get the light chains down by 50%. So you can tell that things have changed a lot, because now we want them down completely. But I also did a part of that trial with his patients, where we looked at how they had got their information when they were first diagnosed, what they wanted, what language they wanted it, meaning what type of English, although obviously the other languages are important, when they wanted to be told, what support they wanted. And we found that at diagnosis, patients are just trying to find that they're going to live. Many of them are not particularly interested in learning a lot more than that. And many patients have said to me, get my partner to learn about it. I'll just do what the doctors want. However, by 6 months, it was a very different situation. And patients were wanting information. They were wanting to ask questions. They wanted to be partners in their treatment. And that has continued. So I was just in the right place at the right time, because then 4 wonderful hematologists, Peter being one of them, heading up the amyloidosis unit in Queensland. It was then just in Brisbane at the Princess Alexandra, but it's now all over Queensland. Fiona Kwok from Westmead, and also Graham, I've forgotten his first, I can't think of his other name, but anyway, he's very well known. He doesn't work there anymore. Simon Gibbs, that we all know so well, started the Box Hill unit, and Hasib came in as a very new person when we'd all been talking quite a lot from about 2017 about what we could do to formalise a service, because if you don't formalise something, then the government's not going to listen to you. This is the thing. So Hasib heads up the Fiona Stanley unit, and he'd been at the Mayo and brought lots and lots of experience to us as well. And we worked pretty hard together. 2017, we decided we'd really work much harder and we'd try and legalise this unit. We also said we needed a website, and Fiona Kwok and I started that in 2017. And it's a very full but informative website that's being reviewed at the moment. But from there, working very hard, we came together and formed a company and a charity. And that, though it became, the AAN became a company in 2021 and a charity. And that was a wonderful experience to know we'd reached that point. But I don't think anybody realised the hard work we had from then on to make it into a company. And I have to say that the board I was part of and the present board has worked incredibly hard to get to that point. But from the very beginning, this organisation has been different at the AAN from any other organisation. It's a partnership between patients and families. It says in the Constitution that decisions will be made in partnership, that we will all look at the same goals, which we do, and the AAN is divided up into committees. From the very beginning, there's been a patient and advisory committee that now is headed up so well by Maureen and Gary Mann that are here today. They have representatives on that committee from each of the states, and representatives from that committee are on the other AAN committees. It is an organisation run by committees. And if you go into the governance page of the website, you will see all of that. And we need new people. So please put your hand up for much of this. And also then there were other changes as I stepped back. Kath Davis, that you all know so well, came bounding in as the patient advocate with loads of energy. And even though she's not well today, you can see she's still got lots of energy. She has continued many of the services we had and added to them. And you'll all know her wonderful Come and Have a Cup with Kath is really roaring ahead and has lots of people joining it once a month. I think it's once a month, Kath, isn't it? Yeah. But she's done lots of other things, and she's just come back from a conference on ATTR run by the Amyloidosis Alliance, and we will all be hearing all of that very soon. Also, the newsletters are written or edited by John Main, who is an AL patient. He is trying very hard to put stories in that you have asked for, and he wants you to send him your ideas. This all comes under the media committee, but John worked very, very hard at that. So there are lots and lots of committees, but one of the very good things that's just happened, and there have been lots of good things that have happened, is that the AAN has just appointed a manager of support services. Jess, are you there today? She was going to try and join us, but she's got a very, very busy program at the moment. But she's been with us about 6 weeks. She is highly educated with a psychology degree and is doing her master's in counselling, has lots of experience in building services and leadership. And I have the great joy of actually being her mentor at the moment. And I have to tell you, it's taught me an enormous amount, and I'm very grateful to her. These services will obviously work very closely with the Patient Advisory Committee, with Kath, and with you all. And when I say all, the AAN is all of you. It wouldn't be there unless we had the patients. No, it wouldn't be there unless we had our wonderful doctors either, but they wouldn't be treating amyloid if you weren't there either. And so I just want to end by saying to you how grateful I am to all of you, how much I've learned from you, the support and the friendship I've had from many, many of you will stay with me forever. And I can see that with Peter Millay as chair of the AAN, with all of these committees, with Olga and Kath running, obviously, the education sessions, the AAN is in very, very good hands. And there's a lot ahead of them, but I know that it will go on from strength to strength with your support and help. Thank you, everybody.
Pat, thank you so very much. This has been such a moving presentation from you, and who is better to speak about what AAN is all about? And it's really wonderful to hear how much AAN has grown over the years and what role you had to play. I think you've really been an inspiration to so many people present here today, and many, many more who are not joining us today. So thank you so much.
Can I just add my thanks to Libby, Olga? I had Libby at the bottom and I've missed her off, but in big letters. But I can tell you that without Libby, who is the executive assistant, the AAN would not be running at the moment. Thank you, Libby, for everything you do.